This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. When the vibes are bad, but the team is good, feels like an appropriate caption for the video and for like a metaphorical picture of Browns fans, because I see Browns fans in here and they're wondering, man, what's this team going to do if there's injuries? What's this team going to do if the quarterback does not play great? What's this team going to do if Nick Chubb does not come back as soon as possible? And it breaks my brain sometimes, because while I understand these questions are valid every year, we lived through the answer to these questions last year. Now, doesn't it feel like it? And what happens if Deshaun doesn't play the whole season? Well, that happened last year. Still won 11 games. What happens if Nick Chubb does not come back and play as many games as we expect? He played 5 quarters last year. I think we have forgotten just how much this team had overcome over the past year to even get to where they are. And I think a lot of people are in a wait and see pattern where they kind of want to see it before they get super excited about it. And I think that's fair. But also I see people using this as an opportunity to kind of just crash out on the negative spectrum and just like think the worst is going to happen. And it's interesting. And like, this is why I hate conversations on the internet, especially like with like anonymous people through like text platforms like comment sections and Twitter, because you don't really get context for who you're talking to, right? Because I think it is an interesting dynamic that some Browns fans have lived with. Like, me and you are of the age of, we were like old enough to know that like Colt McCoy was like really taken seriously here like for a couple of years, right?
The perfect frame of reference.
Yeah, like where if you listen to somebody who was born like in like 2001, their frame of reference is like, oh yeah, I like started watching football. Like our season is like '07, their season is like 2014, and like it's like Kyle Shanahan was here, and that's their point of reference. And then like the team got kind of decent after that, like 4 years after that. So there's some of us who have really experienced the 20 years of just bad football that this team, well, 30 years, this team, not 30. They have given us 30, fortunately. Yeah, 18 years of it, right? And we experienced the bulk of that through our lives. And then there's some who are older than us who went through the whole period of like, Browns are good, Browns are bad, Browns are moving, Browns come back, they stink, and they stink again. And then not all right, but like you've gone through so much with the team. And I think that creates an interesting mix of voices and opinions that has made this offseason one of the more interesting ones discourse wise, because I've seen people down on the defense and I'm like, this defense is probably going to be really good. There's no reason they shouldn't. When you look at this Browns team, in your mind, and we'll share some things, go back and forth, what makes you excited about this team when you like try to remember, okay, it's not going to be Siaki Ika out there like 40 snaps?
Well, just to even like go back slightly to why I feel like people are being so negative in the first place, I do think even when people are negative about the defense, I think it all stems from the quarterback and the questions there and just the investment the team has made at the quarterback position that is just like bleeding into every other part of how people are feeling about this football team in general. Regardless of if it's necessarily valid or not. For me, like you mentioned about the defense, I, in general, am feeling pretty good about the defense coming off of last year. I think we're all interested to see what adjustments are going to be made, especially after that playoff loss. But look, like the talent is there on the defensive side of the ball. So I don't think that is a huge concern. I think offense is the part of the team that is more, I guess, just up in the air. But like you mentioned, regardless of Deshaun Watson playing or not, he didn't play that much last year, and they were still able to get it done. And I think we've been able to see from between Jameis and DTR in the preseason, like I feel pretty good about at least getting like an average level of quarterback play if we need to from them. beyond that, there's like a couple random guys that have stood out to me in the preseason that I didn't necessarily expect to. Cedric Tillman getting some good reps there in the preseason. I think the wide receiver group just being competitive in general. That's at least making me feel like we can put something together here to start off the season.
That's, I guess, one of the first things that has me excited. They're going to make some tough decisions here at wide receiver
Yeah.
because we're talking about potentially leaving off David Bell, who played strong at the end of last year. You're potentially leaving off Michael Woods, who has made plays every time he's been out there, albeit it's been, I think he played a little bit at the end of 2022. People keep reminding me. But he missed the preseason, I think, in 2022 and missed the preseason in 21, his rookie year, because he tore his Achilles, I think, in camp. But he looked pretty good in the OTAs and mini camps from what we can tell. And he comes back out here and he looks pretty strong again. You remember, he was like a 6th, 7th round pick. Like, they do have something invested in him.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a tough decision. Like, all of these guys, like, no disrespect to Austin Watkins, are like way better than like trying to figure out if Austin Watkins is going to slide onto the roster. And Jamari Thrash is somebody that I'm a big fan of. I saw him at Georgia State, did not get to watch him at Louisville as much, but did see him at the Senior Bowl again. And every time I've seen him in person, there's just something about him that stands out. Like, I've made this joke, it's kind of like the anti-Anthony Schwartz, where like when you watch Anthony Schwartz, you're like, man, really great athlete, not great at football. When I watch Jamari Thrash, he's a good athlete, like not a bad athlete at all. But that's somebody who I'm like, that kid can play football. Like, he gets how to, like, he's a really good football player. There's a role for him somewhere in there. And then, you talk about Cedric Tillman, looks like he's really putting it together, year 2, second camp. Back against the wall, right? We were talking about it. Like, he needed to have a good camp, and he had an excellent one. And then we'll see what Jerry Jeudy provides us. But I mean, like, it's not been like it's been a drought of plays made from him or Elijah Moore. And then we all know what Amari Cooper is capable of. I feel like this wide receiver room is pretty strong. It's not like top heavy, like people would want it to be, but it's a strong group of wide. Like, I would take any of the wide receivers the Browns are going to roster and then like +2 that they're going to cut than like who Pittsburgh has minus like George Pickens.
Yeah.
Like,
I can't even remember. I feel like the last time the Browns were in a position like this where they're probably going to have to cut some players that like they've really invested a couple years in and like we're excited about drafting, and like even like a David Bell, like I think Kevin Stefanski really liked him and his style of play when they drafted him. Like, that is not a position we have seen this team have to be in, but I mean, it's not the worst position to be in. We'll take that over not having the talent.
all right, another thing that I'm excited for, especially after this last preseason game, I'm excited for Ken Dorsey. I think what I saw in this last preseason game, because I'm all over the place with DTR. Like, I'll be a fan of him, I won't. And like, I've jumped everywhere with DTR, with the film and what I've seen, what I haven't with him. But what I saw him able to do in that third preseason game was he has this opposite problem that most wide quarterbacks have. Like, most quarterbacks can't get rid of the ball fast enough. He gets rid of the ball too quickly. And in this last preseason game, there were moments where he held the ball, and it was almost kind of like watching Deshaun out there, because he's like patting a little bit and like waiting for something to develop. And when I saw him do that, and there were like a couple incomplete passes, a light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, oh, I get what Ken Dorsey's trying to do. It makes sense now. And I think that's something that has popped up. I talked about this with Cam Justice. And it's like when you watch a restaurant or something getting built and you're like, what is that? And it's just nothing but scaffolding. And then you start to see them put signs up and the structures up. And I think that's what the offense has been for preseason, where like we're starting to see it come together. And then I got a little bit of a preview of like what it looks like. Because like Tyler Huntley's not a good preview of Deshaun. He just doesn't have the arm strength or the confidence in his arm strength. But when DTR like takes his time, I'm like, oh, he can do some of that stuff that Deshaun can do, where he can wait and let that stuff play out. And that's where it starts to click to me, like, okay, they're building this thing around somebody who has not played in the preseason. It probably makes sense that we don't get it. And then the second we see it, they're like, oh, they're moving the ball. They're getting chunks downfield. We're getting guys open down the field, wide open. And I think that got me sufficiently excited for Ken. I think Ken has done great things with Cam Newton. He's done great things with Josh Allen. Like his track record is tremendous as a quarterback's coach in his role as offensive coordinator. It's not the same as it was under Sean McVay, who kind of trusted him to run the entire offense. This is more of a quarterback coach plus type role for
Right.
Ken Dorsey. So he's back in an element that he would be very comfortable with the type of quarterback that he's comfortable with. And I think he knows what he's doing in this kind of environment. And he's also surrounded with a lot of coaches who know what they're doing, right? We talk about Andy Dickerson being in there. I love what I saw from the run game last week in the preseason where they were able to get chunks. I love what I saw from Jerome Ford in a couple of runs that he had there where he got some space. And then I like what I saw from kind of the right side of the offensive line, like the side that was actually starters. And I'm like, okay, I see the vision. It's not as murky. I think there's something there. And I'm almost leaning towards, and I'm probably will be there by the time the season starts because at the end of the day, I do love the Browns. I think this offense is going to surprise some people earlier than later. Like I think a lot of people are anticipating, oh, it's going to start slow. we're gonna start slow. We're gonna do that whole thing. We're gonna talk about the rust with Deshaun Watson. I think this thing comes together sooner than later because it's not about Deshaun Watson learning and doing something completely new like it's been the last 2 years. This is about Deshaun Watson being comfortable doing what he's been asked to do and excelled at. And this is, I think, the first time, because I talked to people in Houston about this, that they've really built something around his strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to come out in this offense. I think they're going to be able to move the ball. And I think it's going to look a lot better than people are anticipating. And I think that surprise factor, I don't think we're going to know what to do with that. Because like we have not been in position to be surprised by anything that Deshaun Watson or this offense has done since he's gotten here. It's been like, you got to do this. So I feel strongly about that. I think that this Ken Dorsey thing is something to actually be excited about.
Yeah, I think when they announced that Kevin was going to retain play calling, I think some people were kind of like, okay, what is Ken Dorsey even actually going to be doing? But I'm in agreement with you that I think he is in a position that he is very comfortable with. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of collaboration happening anyways on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to play calling and all the decisions being made. But I think really tailoring, his strengths to just working with Deshaun Watson, figuring out how to get the best out of him, I think makes the most sense and will hopefully give Deshaun the confidence overall too. And you mentioned, that we typically, I think people are worried about getting off to a slower start and, then having to play catch up later in the season. But, looking at the schedule this year too, this team should go like 4-1 in those first 5 games, maybe dropping one to Dallas there at the beginning or, maybe a fluke one at some point if they do get one.
It's
to Dallas.
always going to be the Raiders. It's always the Raiders.
Going to say the Raiders. I'm like, if it's not Dallas, it's going to be the Raiders. But other than that, it's like there's no reason they shouldn't get off to a strong start, especially considering the later stretches in the season are much more challenging from that perspective. So yeah, I totally agree with you on the Ken Dorsey part of things.
All right. I'm going to have one thing that I'm excited about, and it's going to include Jed Wills of all people. Like,
Not where I thought you were going.
This is an interesting stat that I dug up. I tell people, take it with a huge grain of salt, right? Okay. But this is an interesting stat that I brought up. Jed Wills has played 16 games when the Browns are 2 games over 500. His career average pass blocking grade is like somewhere like high 60s or late 70s. Oh, not late 70s, low 70s. In those games where the Browns are 2 games over 500, Jed Wills has an average PFF pass blocking grade of 80.9.
So you're saying you can't handle the pressure when things are bad.
I feel like Jed Wills, and this happens with a lot of Alabama dudes or a lot of guys who just went to powerhouse colleges. You get used to winning.
Yeah, that's fair.
And losing affects you in a way that it wouldn't for like somebody who went to like Ole Miss where you lose all the time. No disrespect to Ole Miss, but like, you lose a game. You're not like, damn, the season's over if you lose at Ole Miss. But at Alabama, you're conditioned like, if we aren't one of the best teams in the country, what are we doing? Right? Yeah. That's the whole purpose of that program. So I think Jed Wills, like a lot of Alabama players, kind of one of those dudes that you can really only have on a winning team. And I think the good news for Browns fans is I think the Browns are going to be a winning team. So I think you're going to get the best out of Jed Wills this offseason. Well, not this offseason, this season, because this is probably the best team that Jed's been in his NFL career. And I think he will be and he's in the contract year. So he got all the motivator factors. I think it points to Jed Wills fooling people into thinking he's back in 2020. Now, would I re-sign him based on that work? It's going to be tough for Andrew Berry to say, no, I would not. I would just move on from, I want to draft a tackle this year. It's like, again, I'm not even saying this as a Jed Wills guy, but I do think it doesn't look like it now because he's coming off this thing. He's not on PUP. He's practicing. Well, not practicing again, but he's not on PUP. And it doesn't feel great for Jed. But I do think things are aligning for Jed Wills to have a much better season than people are anticipating. And I think we're actually going to be entertaining the conversation by the end of the year. Should the Browns extend Jed Wills before he gets too expensive?
Yeah, I mean, your thought process is interesting too for like how he is on a play-to-play basis, because if things are going poorly for Jed, he just kind of gives up, So it's almost the same and like within the context of a game, how he operates mentally. Like if he's kind of down, then he kind of continues to play in that way. But if he's
some
in
people are front runners, right?
Yeah. It's like give him a cookie and maybe he'll like keep going. Come on, Jed.
Yeah, it's like he needs that win. Like he can't, like if he's not somebody who handles losing in any capacity well, and that's not the greatest trait for your left tackle to have. It's again why I would avoid signing him long term. But for one season, you can get away with. Like this is how dudes have the one seasons that you're like, oh my god, like what happened that one year? This is this is the stuff to pay attention to with these guys.
Yeah, no, that's super fair. I also think just offensive line in general is one of those things it always seems like grass is greener on the other side. We're like, everyone must have so many better tackles on their roster. And then you look at all of those rosters and you're like, not really quite there. So I agree with you. I'm like not in the place of wanting to extend him right now, but he could fool some people if things go his way because he has the talent there. It's been other factors that have kind of held him back from reaching that full potential.
Oh yeah, I believe it's fully mental. For
yeah. Oh yeah.
Like fully mental. And again, I avoid players who have that kind of talent, but like you see it every once in a while, and it's like it's usually everything has to go right. But I think the stars are aligning for Jed to have one of those type of years here. And it's going to be interesting how people react to it because, like, I think he's going to be motivated. I think he's going to make these plays. He's still going to do Jed stuff, right? There's still going to be clips of him being like, okay, well, I just like whatever, dude. Like he thought the play was over. So that stuff's still going to happen. But I think he'll have a strong enough year. Do you have anything else about what you're excited about for the season before we head out?
Yeah, I feel like the big one today is just like everyone who has come off the PUP list, who is coming back from injury, like we are getting, healthy at a good time. Obviously, things can change throughout the season, but it's really important to be getting these guys back. It might be a little rough week one in terms of just timing and rhythm with getting some of these guys back. But at the same time, a lot of them have played together for 2, 3, 4 years. Like they kind of already have that established rhythm. So I'm not as worried about that, but it is really important for this team to be getting those guys back at the right time and ready to go for week one.
All right. Well, that's Ab. Tell them where to find you, Ab.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, not X, Twitter, at Abby_Mueller_. Check out my podcast, Just a Girl from Cleveland. Just ready for football season. Let's do it.
Super excited for football season. It's just getting closer and closer and closer, and it feels like longer. But before then, we'll be rooting for the Baltimore Ravens to lose to the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday. So there is that there. And I don't know how Browns fans gonna take it if they win. Like if the Ravens win, oh boy, y'all gonna be something else. Y'all gonna be something else. Oh, we can't even though the Ravens are going in with 3 new offensive linemen. So if you're worried about the Browns offensive line, the Ravens are able to figure it out. Maybe the Browns might be able to figure it out with their worst offensive lineman being the 20th ranked left tackle in all football. Like I called it rich people problems and people got mad at me, but it's definitely like
That's
rich
it,
people problems that we're dealing with. Like, oh man, who's gonna back up Jed? Who's gonna
yeah.
are we gonna put Jack there? Like really some privileged problems that the Cleveland Browns are experiencing right now. Like I grew up with well, didn't grow up with left tackle problems, or even no, the offensive lines are pretty solid to be honest. Yeah, but we grew up with worse problems with the Cleveland Browns.
Amen.
Other than that, but appreciate you coming on, Ab. Make sure you check her out. Everybody else have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.